The first shot pierced the still dawn air of Whisper Springs, the sound echoing through the town square where Rebecca Dawson stood trembling on the auction block, her hands bound and her spirit nearly broken. The year was 1875, and human decency seemed as scarce as water in the surrounding Nevada desert. The crowd of men gathered in the dusty square shifted uncomfortably, some out of shame, others with predatory anticipation. $1, called the auctioneer, a wiry man with yellowed teeth and no conscience. $1 for this fine woman, debt payment from her late father, legal and proper, gents. Rebecca kept her gaze fixed on the distant mountains. At 22, she'd already endured more than most, losing her parents, the family ranch, and now her freedom. Her honey-brown hair hung in limp strands around her dirt-smudged face, but even in her tattered dress, there was an unmistakable dignity about her. $1, the auctioneer repeated, impatient now. Surely she's worth something to one of you lonely men. From the back of the crowd, a tall figure pushed forward. Thomas Nash hadn't planned on attending any auction that morning. He'd ridden into Whisper Springs with his last dollar in his pocket, looking for work after a long cattle drive north. The 25-year-old cowboy had been heading to the saloon when he heard the commotion. "This ain't right," he muttered, hand moving instinctively to the worn leather pouch where he kept his money, a single silver dollar that was meant to buy him a meal and maybe a bath. $1, the auctioneer shouted again, growing increasingly frustrated. $1 or I'll start taking bids from those offering services instead. Thomas felt his blood run cold at the implication. He stepped forward, his worn boots kicking up dust. "I'll pay the $1, he called out, his voice steady despite the fury building in his chest. The crowd parted, revealing a man with sun-weathered skin and clear blue eyes. Thomas approached the auction block, aware of the stares following him. Rebecca finally looked down, meeting his gaze for the first time. There was no gratitude in her eyes, only wariness and a flash of defiance that struck him to his core. "Here." Thomas handed over his last dollar to the auctioneer, who snatched it eagerly. "Sold to the cowboy," the auctioneer announced, sounding disappointed that no bidding war had ensued. "She's all yours, Mr. Papers and all." Thomas reached up and helped Rebecca down from the platform. When his hand touched hers, she flinched but didn't pull away. He quickly untied the ropes binding her wrists, letting them fall to the ground. "I'm Thomas Nash," he said quietly as the crowd began to disperse, their entertainment over for the day. "Rebecca Dawson," she replied, her voice hoarse but steady, "and I'm not your property?" Thomas nodded, understanding immediately. "I know that. No person should own another." "Then why did you buy me?" Her eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Because I couldn't bear to see what would happen if I didn't." He glanced around at the men still lingering nearby. "And now you're free to go wherever you please." Rebecca looked at him as if he'd grown two heads. "Go where?" "With what money? My father's debts took everything." Thomas scratched his chin, suddenly realizing the predicament. He'd spent his last dollar and now they were both penniless in a town where neither had connections. "I've got my horse," he offered finally, "and I know how to find work. I'm heading to Silver Creek. There's a ranch there looking for hands." Rebecca considered this, weighing her options, which were admittedly few. "I can cook," she said finally, "and so I could find work too." Thomas smiled, a genuine expression that softened his weathered features. "Then it sounds like we might be able to help each other, Miss Dawson." As they walked away from the town square, neither could have predicted how their lives had just irrevocably changed. Thomas had spent everything he had, a single dollar, but somehow it felt like the most valuable purchase of his life. They left town immediately, both eager to put distance between themselves and Whisper Springs. Thomas's horse, a sturdy chestnut gelding named Rusty, carried their meager possessions. They walked alongside, the Nevada sun beating down mercilessly. "We should reach the Miller Creek by nightfall," Thomas said, breaking the silence that had stretched between them. "We can camp there." Rebecca nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "Why were you in Whisper Springs?" Just passing through, finished a cattle drive from Texas, was looking for the next job. He adjusted his hat, shielding his eyes from the sun. You grew up around here. My father had a small ranch about 20 miles east, she said, her voice flat. After my mother died last year, he started drinking, gambling. I tried to keep things going, but I'm sorry, Thomas said simply. Rebecca's laugh was bitter. Sorry doesn't feed the cattle or pay the debts. No, it doesn't, Thomas agreed, but sometimes it's all we have to offer. They continued in silence until the sun began to dip toward the mountains. True to Thomas's word, they reached Miller Creek as twilight settled over the land. He quickly set about making camp, gathering firewood while Rebecca filled their canteen from the creek. I don't have much for supper, Thomas admitted as he got the fire started. Some jerky and a few biscuits from my saddlebag. It's more than I've had in days, Rebecca replied. She hesitated, then added, thank you. The simple acknowledgement seemed to cost her, and Thomas understood. Pride was sometimes all a person had left. We'll reach Silver Creek in about 3 days, he said as they shared the meager meal. The Rocking H Ranch usually hires hands this time of year. The owner, Mr. Harrington, is tough but fair. And will he hire women? Rebecca asked pointedly. His wife runs the house, Thomas explained. She might need help, and if not there, the town has an inn and a few shops. Rebecca nodded, considering this information. I won't be a burden to you, Mr. Nash. I'll earn my keep. Thomas, he corrected gently, and I never thought otherwise. That night, Rebecca slept wrapped in Thomas's spare blanket while he kept watch by the fire. He studied her in the flickering light, the way her features softened in sleep, the stubborn set of her jaw even in repose. She was beautiful, he realized with a start, though he quickly pushed the thought away. She needed his help, not his admiration. Dawn came with a chill in the air. They set off early, sharing a breakfast of cold biscuits. As they walked, Thomas began pointing out landmarks and sharing stories of his travels. Gradually, Rebecca's responses grew less terse, and by midday, she was asking questions about his life. You've never settled anywhere, she asked as they rested in the shade of a large boulder. Thomas shook his head. Never found a reason to. My pa was a drifter, and I guess I followed in his footsteps. What about family? Lost my ma when I was 12. Pa died in a mining accident 5 years later. He shrugged as if it didn't matter, but Rebecca saw through the casual gesture. So we're both orphans, she observed. Seems that way, Thomas agreed. But we're survivors too. On the second night, trouble found them. They had made camp near a small grove of cottonwoods when Thomas spotted riders approaching. He quickly doused the fire and moved Rebecca behind a thick stand of trees. Stay here, he whispered, checking his revolver. If anything happens to me, take Rusty and ride north. Follow the North Star. I won't leave you, Rebecca argued, surprising them both with the vehemence in her voice. Before Thomas could respond, a gruff voice called out, "We know you're there. Come out nice and easy." Thomas stepped into the clearing, his hand near his gun but not touching it. 3 riders sat on horseback, their faces shadowed by the moonlight. "Evening, gentlemen," Thomas said calmly. "Just a traveler making camp for the night." "That's so," the lead rider leaned forward. "Thought I saw a woman with you earlier. My friends and I could use some female company." Thomas's jaw tightened. "No woman here, just me." The men exchanged glances, clearly not believing him. "Search the area," the leader ordered one of his companions. Thomas tensed, ready to draw, when suddenly Rebecca stepped into the clearing behind him. "I'm here," she announced, "but I'm not what you're looking for." Thomas wanted to curse her foolishness, but there was no time. The men were already dismounting, grins spreading across their faces. "Well, well," the leader said. "Looks like we struck gold after all. She's my wife," Thomas lied, moving to stand beside Rebecca. "We're heading to Silver Creek to visit her ailing mother." The leader snorted. "Funny, I don't see no wedding rings." Rebecca stepped forward, her eyes flashing with a boldness Thomas hadn't yet seen. "We were robbed on the trail, took everything except the clothes on our backs and this old horse." The men hesitated, unsure now. Thomas seized the opportunity. "We don't want trouble, just trying to get to Silver Creek." The leader studied them for a long moment. Silver Creek, that's Harrington territory. You know the old man, planning to ask him for work, Thomas replied honestly. Harrington's a mean old cuss, one of the other men said. But he's always hiring. The tension began to ease slightly, but Thomas remained vigilant. The leader stepped closer to Rebecca, his gaze traveling over her in a way that made Thomas's hand inch toward his gun again. Pretty wife you got, the man said. Shame about those robbers. Maybe we could offer some assistance for a price. Before Thomas could respond, Rebecca spoke, her voice steady. My husband's a crack shot, mister. Won competitions all across Texas. She gestured to Thomas. Show them, darling. Thomas blinked in surprise but quickly recovered. Spotting a pine cone hanging from a branch about 50 yards away, he drew his revolver and fired in one fluid motion. The pine cone exploded in a shower of fragments. The men looked impressed despite themselves. Nice shooting, the leader admitted grudgingly. Thank you, Thomas said, holstering his gun. Now, if you gentlemen don't mind, my wife needs her rest. There was a tense moment when Thomas thought they might have to fight after all, but then the leader nodded and remounted his horse. Silver Creek's about a day's ride that way, he said, pointing west. Tell Harrington that Joe Barker says hello. With that, the three men rode off into the night. Thomas waited until they were well out of sight before turning to Rebecca. That was either very brave or very foolish, he said, unable to decide which. Rebecca gave a shaky laugh. Probably both, but it worked. It did, Thomas admitted. Where did you get the idea about me being a sharpshooter? My father used to compete, she said. I've seen good shooting before. I took a chance that you knew how to use that gun you're carrying. Thomas shook his head in amazement. You're full of surprises, Rebecca Dawson. They decided to break camp and travel through the night, just in case the men changed their minds and returned. By dawn, they were exhausted but had put considerable distance between themselves and the potential danger. As they crested a hill, the landscape opened before them, revealing a valley with a small settlement nestled against the mountain's Silver Creek. We made it, Thomas said, unable to keep the relief from his voice. Rebecca nodded, swaying slightly with fatigue. Without thinking, Thomas put an arm around her shoulders to steady her. She stiffened momentarily, then relaxed against him. Just a little farther, he promised. Then we can rest. They entered Silver Creek mid-morning. It was larger than Whisper Springs, with a proper main street lined with businesses, a general store, a bank, a saloon, and even a small hotel. People moved about with purpose, barely glancing at the newcomers. Let's try the hotel first, Thomas suggested. You can clean up while I ask about work at the Rocking H. Rebecca looked down at her tattered dress and nodded gratefully. I must look a sight. You look like someone who survived a hard journey, Thomas corrected her gently, and that's nothing to be ashamed of. The hotel proprietor, Mrs. Jenkins, was a plump woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She took one look at Rebecca and clucked her tongue. You poor dear, you look half-starved. Come with me. I've got a room where you can wash up, and I'll find you something clean to wear. Thomas reached for his empty money pouch before remembering their situation. Madam, we don't exactly have— Oh, hush, Mrs. Jenkins interrupted. I'm not asking for payment yet. Get yourself over to the Rocking H&C about that job first. Thomas thanked her profusely before turning to Rebecca. Will you be all right here? Rebecca nodded, some of her wariness falling away in the face of Mrs. Jenkins's kindness. I'll be fine. Go. Thomas found the Rocking H Ranch easily enough. It was the largest spread in the area, with sprawling pastures and a sturdy two-story house overlooking the operation. He approached the barn, where several men were working with horses. Looking for Mr. Harrington, he announced. A weathered man in his 60s straightened up from checking a horse's hoof. You found him. What can I do for you, son? Name's Thomas Nash. I'm looking for work. I've got experience with cattle, horses, and I'm not afraid of hard labor. Harrington studied him with sharp eyes. Where'd you ride in from? Most recently, a cattle drive from Texas to Nevada. Before that, worked ranches in Colorado and Wyoming. The older man nodded thoughtfully. As it happens, I just lost 2 hands to gold fever. They headed to California last week. He spat on the ground. Fools. For every man who strikes it rich, 100 die broken. I prefer honest work for honest pay, Thomas said. Good answer. Harrington looked him over once more. Bunkhouse is behind the barn. Pay is $30 a month plus meals. You start at sunrise tomorrow. Thomas could hardly believe his luck. Thank you, sir. There's one more thing. I'm traveling with a young woman. She's looking for work as well. Harrington raised an eyebrow. Wife? No, sir, just someone who needs help. She can cook and sew. Harrington considered this information. My wife could use help in the house. Send the girl up to the main house tomorrow morning. Mrs. Harrington will decide if she's suitable. Thank you, Mr. Harrington. Thomas extended his hand, which the older man shook firmly. Joe Barker says hello, by the way. Harrington's eyes narrowed. Barker, eh? You friends with that troublemaker? No, sir, just crossed paths on the trail. Good. Barker's got a loose understanding of property rights. Harrington nodded toward the bunkhouse. Get yourself settled. Supper's at 6. Thomas headed back to town, elated with the news. He found Rebecca at the hotel, transformed by a bath and fresh clothes, a simple blue dress that Mrs. Jenkins had provided. You look. Thomas trailed off, suddenly unsure of himself. Clean, Rebecca suggested with a small smile. Beautiful, he said honestly, then quickly added, I got the job. Mr. Harrington wants you to come to the main house tomorrow morning to speak with his wife about working there. Rebecca's face lit up with genuine hope for the first time since they'd met. Really? Oh, Thomas, that's wonderful. Her spontaneous joy caught him off guard. It was the first time she'd used his given name, and somehow that, combined with her smile, made his heart skip a beat. I start at dawn, he explained. I'll be staying in the bunkhouse at the ranch, but I can walk you to the main house first. Mrs. Jenkins appeared behind Rebecca. She can stay here tonight. First night's free for newcomers, town tradition. Thomas thanked her again, then turned back to Rebecca. I'll come for you at first light. Before he left, Rebecca caught his arm. Thomas, I don't know how to thank you. He shook his head. No thanks needed. Anyone would have done the same. No, she said firmly, they wouldn't. What you did in Whisper Springs, giving everything you had for a stranger, I'll never forget that. Their eyes held for a long moment, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of the unlikely bond they'd formed in just a few short days. Get some rest, he said finally. Tomorrow's a new beginning. The next few weeks settled into a rhythm. Thomas worked from dawn till dusk with the ranch hands, while Rebecca found her place in the main house, helping Mrs. Harrington with cooking and household management. They saw each other occasionally at Sunday dinners when the house staff ate with the ranch hands, or sometimes in passing when Rebecca brought lunch to the men in the fields. Each brief encounter left Thomas wanting more time with her. He found himself looking forward to those moments, watching how Rebecca gradually blossomed in her new environment. The haunted look in her eyes had faded, replaced by quiet confidence. A month after their arrival, the Harringtons hosted a barn dance to celebrate the end of branding season. The entire ranch gathered, along with folks from town and neighboring spreads. A fiddle player and banjo picker provided lively music, and tables groaned under the weight of food. Thomas spotted Rebecca helping serve punch. She wore a pretty green dress that Mrs. Harrington had given her, and her hair was pinned up with a few curls framing her face. She looked up and caught him watching. A blush colored her cheeks, but she smiled and made her way toward him. Enjoying the party? She asked. More now, he admitted. You look lovely, Rebecca. Thank you. She glanced around at the dancing couples. Mrs. Harrington says I've been a godsend. She's even paying me a proper wage now. Mr. Harrington seems satisfied with my work too, Thomas said. He's put me in charge of breaking the new horses. Rebecca's eyes widened with concern. Isn't that dangerous? The worry in her voice warmed him. Can be, but I've got a way with horses. The music shifted to a slower tune, and Thomas gathered his courage. Would you care to dance, Miss Dawson? Rebecca hesitated only briefly before nodding. I'd like that very much, Mr. Nash. He led her to the dance floor, placing one hand respectfully at her waist while taking her hand with the other. They moved together awkwardly at first, then with increasing confidence as they found their rhythm. "I never thanked you properly," Rebecca said as they swayed to the music. "For what? For seeing me as a person, not property, for spending your last dollar to help me." Thomas looked down at her upturned face, suddenly aware of how close they were. "Best dollar I ever spent," he said softly. Rebecca's eyes shimmered in the lantern light. "Why did you really do it, Thomas?" He considered his answer carefully. "At first it was just the right thing to do, but now—" "Now," she prompted when he didn't continue. "Now I think maybe it was fate," he finished, "bringing us together." Rebecca's breath caught, and for a moment Thomas worried he'd spoken too boldly. But then she moved slightly closer in his arms. "I used to not believe in fate," she admitted. "Not after everything that happened, but lately I've been wondering." The music ended, but neither moved to separate. Around them, couples shifted for the next dance, but they remained still, caught in their own private moment. "Rebecca," Thomas began, not entirely sure what he wanted to say, but knowing he needed to say something. Before he could continue, Mr. Harrington's voice boomed across the barn. "Everybody outside. Riders coming fast." The spell broken, Thomas reluctantly released Rebecca and followed the crowd outside. In the moonlight, they could see a group of horsemen approaching at a gallop. Thomas instinctively moved Rebecca behind him. The riders pulled up in front of the gathered crowd, and Thomas recognized Joe Barker among them. The man looked different now. His face was harder, his eyes wild. "Evening, Harrington," Barker called out. "Hope we're not interrupting your little party." "What do you want, Barker?" Harrington demanded. "Heard you got a good season, thought maybe you might share some of that good fortune." Barker's gaze swept the crowd, stopping when he spotted Thomas and Rebecca. "Well, look who it is, the sharpshooter and his pretty wife." Thomas stiffened. "We're just ranch hands, Barker." "We've got no quarrel with you." "No." Barker's grin was unpleasant. "Funny thing, after we met you on the trail, I got to thinking. Started asking around about a pretty woman and a cowboy traveling together. Imagine my surprise when I heard about an auction in Whisper Springs. A woman sold for $1 to a drifter." He leaned forward in his saddle. "You lied to me, friend." Rebecca stepped forward, ignoring Thomas's attempt to keep her back. "What does it matter to you?" "It matters because I don't like being lied to," Barker snarled. "And it matters because that paper the auctioneer gave you isn't worth spit. Her daddy owed me money, lots of it. She's rightfully mine." A murmur ran through the crowd. Thomas felt cold fury rise within him. "That's not how it works, Barker. People aren't property." "The law says otherwise," Barker retorted. "I've got papers proving her daddy's debt to me. Hand her over and nobody gets hurt." Mr. Harrington stepped forward. "This is my land, Barker. You and your men need to leave." Barker's hand moved to his gun. "Not without what's mine." Everything happened in a blur after that. Guns were drawn, shots fired. Thomas pushed Rebecca toward the barn, drawing his own revolver. He fired twice, hitting one of Barker's men in the shoulder. From the corner of his eye, he saw Harrington and several ranch hands engaging the other riders. "Run!" he shouted to Rebecca, turning to face Barker, who was dismounting, gun aimed at Thomas's chest. "She's not going anywhere," Barker growled. Thomas stood his ground. "She's not yours, she never was." "I paid good money to her father," Barker argued. "She belongs to me." "I paid for her freedom," Thomas countered. "And that's something money can't buy back." Barker's face twisted with rage. He fired, the bullet grazing Thomas's arm. Thomas returned fire, hitting Barker in the leg. The man howled but kept coming, tackling Thomas to the ground. They struggled in the dust, each fighting for control of their weapons. In the confusion, Thomas lost sight of Rebecca. He managed to pin Barker down, pressing the barrel of his gun against the man's temple. "It's over, Barker," Thomas panted. "You lost." A shot rang out and Thomas flinched, expecting pain. Instead, he saw Barker's eyes widen in shock. Standing a few feet away was Rebecca, holding a smoking pistol that she must have picked up during the chaos. "You shot me," Barker gasped, clutching his bleeding shoulder. "Be grateful I didn't aim lower." Rebecca said, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. By then, Harrington's men had subdued the remaining riders. The ranch owner approached, his own gun still drawn. Sheriff's on his way, he informed them. These boys will be spending a long time behind bars. Attempted robbery, assault with deadly weapons, the list goes on. Thomas got to his feet, wincing at the pain in his arm. Rebecca was immediately at his side, examining the wound. "It's just a graze," he assured her. "You could have been killed," she said, her voice breaking. "So could you," he pointed out. Rebecca's eyes met his, fierce and determined. "No one is going to own me, Thomas. No one is going to take away my freedom again." "No," he agreed. "No one ever will." The sheriff arrived with deputies from Silver Creek, taking Barker and his men into custody. The ranch doctor tended to the wounded, including Thomas's arm, while statements were taken and the story pieced together. When the excitement finally died down, Thomas found Rebecca sitting alone on the porch of the main house, staring at the stars. He joined her silently, offering his canteen. "Mrs. Harrington says Barker's been causing trouble all over the territory," Rebecca said after taking a sip. "The sheriff thinks they can connect him to several robberies and maybe even a murder in Carson City." "He won't be bothering anyone for a long time," Thomas assured her. They sat in companionable silence for a while, the sounds of the night surrounding them. Finally, Rebecca turned to face him. "What happens now, Thomas? What do you want to happen?" he asked gently. Rebecca looked down at her hands. "All my life others have decided my fate. My father, then his creditors, then Barker. Even you in a way, though you gave me choices. And now I want to decide for myself." She met his gaze, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "But I've realized something these past weeks. Freedom isn't just about being able to go wherever you want. Sometimes it's about choosing to stay." Thomas felt his heart quicken. "Are you saying you want to stay in Silver Creek?" "I'm saying I want to stay with you," she clarified, "if that's what you want too." Thomas reached for her hand, entwining their fingers. "Rebecca, when I spent my last dollar at that auction, I never imagined I was really buying my future, my happiness." He took a deep breath. "I've fallen in love with you." Rebecca's smile was like the sunrise breaking over the mountains. "And I with you, Thomas Nash." When he kissed her, it felt like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. They broke apart at the sound of someone clearing their throat. Mr. Harrington stood a few feet away, looking equal parts amused and embarrassed. "Sorry to interrupt," he said gruffly, "but I've been thinking. That old Johnson place that borders my property to the east, it's been sitting empty for years. Good land, decent house that needs some work. Could use a capable man to run it." He looked directly at Thomas. "Man who's proven himself loyal and hardworking." Thomas stood, stunned by the implication. "Sir, I'm not getting any younger," Harrington continued, looking to scale back a bit. "Could use a neighbor I trust." He glanced at Rebecca. "Preferably a family man settled down with a good woman." "Are you offering to sell me the Johnson place?" Thomas asked incredulously. "Offering to help you buy it," Harrington corrected. "You've earned your wages and then some these past weeks. I'd be willing to stake you for the rest, to be paid back from your share of the cattle we could raise together." Thomas was speechless. Rebecca squeezed his hand, her eyes shining with unshed tears of joy. "That's very generous, Mr. Harrington," she said when Thomas couldn't find his voice. "Not generosity, good business," the older man insisted, though his expression softened. "And maybe a wedding present if you two are heading in that direction." He nodded once, then turned to go, pausing only to add, "Think about it. Offer stands either way." When they were alone again, Thomas turned to Rebecca. "I don't have much to offer you yet," he began. She pressed a finger to his lips. "You've already given me everything that matters: freedom, respect, love." She smiled up at him. "The rest we'll build together." 2 months later, they stood on the porch of the old Johnson place, now the Nash Ranch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in gold and crimson. The house behind them was still a work in progress, but already felt like home. Rebecca leaned against her husband's shoulder, his arm secure around her waist. "Do you ever think about how differently things might have turned out?" she asked. If you hadn't been in Whisper Springs that day, Thomas pressed a kiss to her temple. I try not to. Some things are too painful to consider. I used to think fate was cruel, Rebecca mused. Now I'm not so sure. Fate brought us together, Thomas agreed. But what we've built, that's been our choice every day. Rebecca turned in his arms, her face tilted up to his. A choice I'd make again and again. As would I, he promised, sealing the words with a kiss, from a single dollar spent in desperation to a love worth more than all the gold in Nevada. Their journey had only just begun, but already they knew the true value of what they'd found in each other. Not ownership but partnership, not possession but belonging. And as the first stars appeared in the evening sky, they stepped into their home together, certain that whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, they would face them as they had faced everything else, side by side, never letting go.